Welcome to Empowered Mind, Body, Soul. I'm your host, Olivia Paige with Ascension Healing Sounds, and in today's episode, we are joined by special guest Michelle Manley, a Soma spiritual mentor. And today we are going to be talking about how to find your equilibrium. Empowered Mind, Body, Soul. A podcast journey to your truth with heartfelt stories, sound healing, and life hacks. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be chatting with you. Let's start with, what is a Soma spiritual mentor?
Yeah, that's an unusual word. I made up the term. I help people find their equilibrium through both somatic healing and spirituality and mindset work. I help people embody mind and soul. That's my holistic approach to helping people. I feel very strongly that part of healing is getting back in touch with our bodies, the somatic piece. So that's why I put that in. And obviously spirituality is very important to me.
And what is Soma healing specifically? I've heard it is associated with breath work, but I don't really know what it is.
Oh, awesome. Somatic healing is basically healing through the body. It's a way to get out of the mind and back into the body and process emotions out through the body physically. It can be breath work. I use a breath release technique that is incredibly effective, but it can also be, I feel, through dance, through creative outlets. It's basically a way to get anything that you're carrying, any wounds, any heat, hurts, out of your body and externally, so you're not carrying the weight of that around with you.
So do you have to set an intention before you were to express this somatic healing? If you were to do dance or whatever, would you say, okay, I'm going to use this to release whatever it is you're trying to release?
Absolutely. The way my method is, you get in touch with that emotion, you bring it to the fore so that you're really there, you're feeling it, and then you setting that attention, then you release it. It's an amazing technique. Somatic healing is in its heyday right now, I think. You see it everywhere, but it is incredibly effective.
Okay. And so then how do you do a session with a client?
That's a wonderful question. Usually we sit down, we discuss what your issues are, what you want to bring, what's coming up for you at this time. I personally like to call in our energy, our higher selves. Depending on the depth of the work, we may call in ancestors. It really depends on where you're at and what you're going through. Then there's a lot of talk, a lot of mindset work to begin with, because you get it out of the mind. So you got to look at what's in the mind. So we discuss and pull apart. What's the emotion? What's the fact? What's just the feeling? And then once we've identified the feeling, then we can work with that, and it can be released, as I said, through a number of ways. I'm also an energetic healer, so sometimes I bring in that piece as well. If I feel like the client is doing everything they can do here in this plane, then I can help them on the energetic plane as well. So it really is very tailored to the person.
Okay. That's nice. But if you're doing a session, because you said this Soma healing portion of it can be expressed in different ways. So if you're doing a session with a client, how do you know which outlet to use to work through that intention?
It's a great question as well. A lot of it's intuitive. A lot of it is what the client, what their nature is. Some people really are more expressive. Others are a little more closed off. It really depends. My first general rule is to use a breath release technique. Once I've identified, or we have identified, the emotion that we're working with, we use a breath release technique to sort of get rid of the heaviness of it. And then I usually send them home with homework. Okay, now you go and you do your piece. You come up with a dance, go write a piece, paint, whatever they're called to. But the breath release technique is usually the first line of action.
Okay. And so what brought you to becoming a Soma spiritual healer?
That is interesting. I was in an abusive marriage for 12 years. It was intense. Coming out of that, I didn't know who I was anymore. I had lost me. I went from I was a women's studies major. I was an anthropology major. I was very rooted in my women power. And somehow even I ended up in an abusive marriage, and I stayed. There was a lot to unpack there. And I had great supports after the marriage failed, and basically work through it. But what I realized is there was only so much that I could do mentally, that I was still holding on to some pieces in my body. And that led me to the work of Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine, and their work on somatic healing. Just, it resonated for me. This whole idea that we store, their phrase they use is the issues in your tissues. The fact that we store so much in our bodies. I had fibromyalgia. I could see the chronic pain throughout my body, and I knew it wasn't for me. It was just all this stuff I was carrying. So really, I came to it as in desperation in my own healing. And that brought me there.
Okay. So was it just the fibromyalgia that kind of tipped you off, that you were holding on to some, I don't know, some of this heavy energy from the abusive marriage, or were there other indications?
I also was diagnosed with complex PTSD. So there were definitely other indications. I had a lot of triggers. I knew I was reacting in ways that I didn't want to react. I was carrying pain I didn't want to carry.
Mm,
And that realization and seeing how I was and knowing that I didn't have to live this way, that was really the key for me.
okay. All right. What was some of the training that led you to create your Soma spiritual mentoring that you do?
I became a Reiki master teacher about 10 years ago, and that was incredibly linchpin moment for me. It was starting to realize I could take responsibility for the energies around me and inside of me, and that I could shift them and I could move them and I could actually directly impact them. That was a light bulb moment. And then I have taken a class with Bessel van der Kolk, and that was wonderful. I've learned a lot. I've taken with a few other somatic healers, but he's the most well known. And then I worked for about a year and a half now with a somatic coach who has really walked me through a lot of the different healing techniques and really learning to externalize that pain.
Okay. So do you want to talk about being a cult survivor?
Happily. it's that's a funny thing. It took me a long time to unpack how I became in a fundamentalist Christian cult. This women's studies and comparative religions major, anthropology student, open-minded Taoist Buddhist ends up in a fundamentalist cult. But it happened. And I believe for me, it was a lot of, they provided answers. I had lost my father at a young age. I was carrying some pain. And they came in with, oh, if you put everything here and do exactly this, everything's going to be fine. And unpacking that after I left, after that, I was there for 6 years, honestly, not ever fully believing what they were saying. There were things that they preached that just didn't sit right with me. And I was often told I was rebellious and I was hard to control. Yeah. And I'm proud of it. And coming out of it was hard. Coming out of it was very hard. And it primed me for the marriage because I really felt that I had quote unquote left God. So therefore I deserved the abuse. And
Mm,
that's a real minefield of a mind mess there. And unpacking that took some time. Being in a cult is something I can look back on now and I can say I've learned a lot from it. I can't say I'm proud of it. I can't say it was necessary, but I learned a lot. And I believe it was definitely part of my journey. But overcoming that has been wonderful.
Can you tell us more about what it was like? What was the culture like?
Sure, very fundamentalist. The Bible was the word of God and was literal. The stories were, there were some that were figurative, like Noah's Ark, but most of it you were to accept literally. There was very much a culture of not being in touch with your emotions. There is a quote from the Bible that was beaten over my head. It's the heart cannot be trusted and is deceitful above all things.
Wow.
I mean, where are you gonna go from that? If you're told you can't even trust your own instincts, but only this book, that was very much the culture. It very much divorced me from my own intuition, from my own body, from my own inner knowing. Yeah.
Because, of course, I think the Bible has been rewritten so many times, or these
Mm-hmm.
types of religious books have been
Yeah.
rewritten so many times. And I just feel like there's a little bit of agenda behind them, especially with something like that. Like, that's teaching you not to trust your heart because they don't want you to be connected. They want you to be subdued. They want you to be able to follow the rules and do what you're told. And yeah.
Absolutely. It's not, my experience was it was not to connect you with God source energy. It was to control you. It was to make you docile and compliant, especially women, super docile and compliant. And you're 100% right. The Bible has been written and rewritten so many times by kings, by popes, it's just, the list goes on. And it's always been a political tool. And books have been removed. And it's to take it as it's written today as a literal thing was definitely not a holistic approach for me. I'm trying to be delicate here in how I phrase this, but it was not right for me at all. And I don't think it's right for most people the way it's being taught in certain sectors right now.
So was this like a community that you lived with? Okay.
We were allowed to live anywhere. You didn't have to live in a
Okay.
commune. However, a lot of the members would live together because it was very much an us and them mentality. We're the saved and the rest are the lost. You don't want to live among the lost. You want to live with the saved. So for many years, I lived with roommates. The reason I left the church was not necessarily by my own choice, although I was certainly one foot out the door. I had fallen in love with my ex-husband, and he wasn't a member, and we were only allowed to marry members. And so because I made the choice to elope with him at that time, I was ostracized, which was incredibly devastating in terms of the connections I had made. I didn't care so much about the teachings and the leadership, but the friendships I had made, that was hard.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say that many of those people have since left the church and we've reconnected, and it's wonderful.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
We
nice.
help each other heal, I think.
Oh, okay. That's nice. The whole we are the saved and the people who aren't in this with us are not the saved. It reminds me of it reminds me of this concept of ascension, actually. I see a lot of spiritual and metaphysical people talking about how as we ascend, that there's going to be like this timeline split and how some people are going to stay in the 3D and some people are going to go to 5D. And to me, it just feels very heaven and hell. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that resonates with me. I don't know. It feels so based in that heaven and hell, and I don't like that part. Someone did channel a message, and their explanation for that was that some people really are choosing to stay in that 3D, but I don't know. I have a hard time with that. I feel like if we're going to ascend, we're going to ascend together as a collective. You know, there's 8 billion people on this planet. So how are we working together to make the world really a better place? It's hard for me to believe that there's people on this planet that wouldn't want to live in a place that was more peaceful and harmonious and loving and kind and supportive. It just made me think of that when you mentioned that mentality that group had.
It's funny. I see the same correlation. I also see it in other New Age, metaphysical, ascension communities, that whole broad area. There's very much this we're fighting against evil concept that comes in, which again is very rooted in the same thing, this heaven and hell, this good and bad. And I agree with you. I don't see that dichotomy. We're all together. It just is what is. And we need to work with what is and ascend together collectively. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. I think people don't realize how culturally, when it comes to being spiritual and metaphysical, even though that's the label I give myself, I'm trying to find like a new word for it, a new way of talking about it.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. But is how all of these things, even the spiritual, is a facet of other things like other religions and other teachings. And these things are being passed down through the ancestral line, being passed down through the generations of what to believe, how to label things, and all these things. And so I think it's interesting that some people in the community, and I know I've said it myself, which is, oh, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Like somehow that makes me different or better, or I don't know, disconnected from the dogma of religion. But there's so much dogma in the spiritual, I think, too. I'm really working towards changing my thinking and maybe working through some limiting beliefs that I've had, that I've actually learned from the spiritual community, and working through that and trying to find a different perspective that feels more aligned with me, that feels better as a whole for the whole collective, and not just like I'm in this by myself to, I don't know, to help raise the collective and those of us that are chosen or whatever the heck it is, or to ascend to this new reality and way of living. So that's something I've been working through actually the last couple of years, and just trying to see where I land. And I shouldn't say see where I land, because I don't feel like there's like an ending. I think hopefully it's about evolving and growing and learning and expanding.
Absolutely. And you hit upon something really important. And one of the benefits of coming out of a cult is that I met the deconstruction community. This wonderful community that helps people deconstruct religious dogma. And as a result of that and some of the work I've done, I'm able to pull apart these. What do I believe and why? Why do I believe it? Is it because it aligns and because it resonates, or is it because I've believed it since I was a child? Or is it familiar to something I've believed since I was a child? And I think learning to question all that is so imperative. We need to look at that. And I'm in a similar place. I'm trying to parse out, how do I express what I believe succinctly so that others can understand where I'm coming from without a 3-hour conversation or something. And it's hard. It's hard to coalesce those beliefs and to really, even like you said, parse them out, pull them apart, look at them, and what is true for you and what can be applied to the collective and what carries water.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm trying to be more open to letting my truth evolve and change. And so maybe my truth will be different tomorrow, and that's okay. And maybe it'll go back to the way it was 2 days ago or whatever. But just being open, and that's why I'm excited to have these conversations, to hear other people's perspectives and their thoughts and feelings about things, and where they're coming from and what they've learned and experienced.
It's funny.
So
I was talking to a friend and I was like, I have deep beliefs that I believe in my core, but I'm not rigid about it. And I think that's the key, to keep that ability to allow it to flow, to evolve, to change. And as you said, maybe it's going to change day to day, but the core of who you are, those core values, those will guide you through. But the beliefs and the way they're expressed, that can shift and change. And I think that's good. I really do. I think that's right. I think that shows an agility of the mind and soul to go with the flow. And I don't know, I'm a fan of that.
yeah, for sure. So you said that you were in this abusive relationship for a long time, over a decade. How did you find the strength and the courage to leave that marriage?
Interestingly enough, much like the church, the universe stepped in and pushed me. As much as I wanted out, my husband he was abusive. He was in the finance industry. He was very well to do. I was on disability with the fibromyalgia. It was very much of, oh, they're going to give me the kids, a lot of that fear. So I stayed because I certainly wasn't going to leave the children alone with him. Not that he ever did anything to the children. However, they certainly witnessed his behaviors. And on Mother's Day in 2012, he actually tried to kill me. He tried to run me over with the van. It was really intense. There was no going back from that. Although we did attempt it, believe it or not. He got some help. He stabilized. We went to counseling. We tried to work it out, but then he backslid again, and the behaviors weren't changing. It was a lot of, I think he wanted to change. I think he saw it, but he just wasn't ready to do the deep work of changing. So at that point, I certainly couldn't live with them. He was very dangerous. So we together left, and it was a journey. I reclaimed very important bits of myself. I reclaimed my sexuality. I came out as pansexual, and that was really a big piece of it, because that, from the church teachings through the marriage, that had been very perverted, really. So coming back to that was huge. Becoming a Reiki master. And again, as I was saying earlier, learning to take control of my energy and to really see, what am I carrying? What's mine? What's not mine? And that I'm carrying that I don't need to. That was important. I had a great counselor, and a big piece of her job was reminding me again and again, until I believed it, that I was worthy. I so didn't believe that. I certainly was going to get better for my children, but I wasn't doing it for myself. I just didn't
Right.
have that belief in myself anymore. So I think for 2 years, I think that's literally her job, was just to tell me, no, your feelings are valid. You can feel them. They're not bad, and you're worthy. And so I think getting that message just repeatedly was incredibly important. And then bringing in the somatic pieces and the healing pieces, and each avenue I've explored, each rabbit hole I've gone down has given me a little piece of myself back. And so, I claimed that and I reclaimed that. And eventually I was like, oh my gosh, I'm healing. I don't ever say I'm healed, because I think it's an ongoing journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I have certainly resolved a lot of those issues to the point that I'm functional and I can control my triggers. I know what they are. I've reached my equilibrium. I'm balanced in a way that I had never been before. And it was reclaiming little bits of myself from the places that I had left it.
Was it hard at first when you were seeing that therapist and she was giving you that message that your feelings were valid? Was it hard for you to open up and actually express those feelings? And how long did it take, do you think?
Yes. I was, again, between the church and the marriage, was so divorced from feeling my feelings, that a big piece of it was learning to even identify what I was feeling. No, what you're feeling is anger. Like, no, anger is a bad emotion. I can't feel that. And learning to just fully accept that. That was really big. I was also very codependent. There was so much guilt I felt for leaving him the way he was. Like, it was my responsibility to heal him. And that was another big piece that she had to work with me through. It was really hard. It was a message I was not ready to hear for quite some time.
It sounds like, though, that the church group that you were a part of ingrained that in your head, maybe that it was your job to heal him. It was your job to keep your voice not heard, keep your voice quiet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This whole standing on my own 2 feet and being my own person. Yeah, that was hard because of the messages I had received. It was very much of, don't take up space. And the message I was getting from my therapist was, no, take up space, claim your place in the world. And that was hard for me to push through at first. And there was a point, I remember it very clearly, where she was saying it and I didn't believe it, but I decided to act as if I did. And I was like, you know what? On faith, I'm going to try it her way.
Mm.
And it shifted. Things shifted as a result.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm so glad that you found this therapist and that she was able to help you through this.
She was wonderful. And my children needed, it was a family therapist, and my children needed a lot of support as well. Like I said, he had never abused them physically. Emotionally, he was very volatile in the house. We never knew what would set him off, kind of thing. So they had their stuff to work through too. And yeah, she was a godsend, truly.
How long have you been out of the marriage?
It was, it was a 4-year divorce because it was really intense. There were multiple restraining orders, there were threats to hurt us, and it was intense. So it took a long time to litigate. So I was officially divorced in 2016. However, we separated in 2012.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And is there anything else you'd like to share about that experience of any part that we've talked about today? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I would love to encourage anyone that's watching to really to learn to trust yourself, to hear your own inner wisdom, that it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's who you are. Those little sparks inside of you, those should be followed. Those are what's going to get you through. And for me, I think the biggest piece of my healing really has been learning that it's okay to be fully me and to be fully who I am and to honor even the emotions. I won't lie, there are still some emotions that are challenging for me. And they may always be that way, but at least at this point I can accept them and I can work with them and I'm not afraid anymore of them. And I think so many of us walk around afraid of our emotions because we're in a society that doesn't allow us to freely express, big emotions. Look at us with children when they're feeling stuff. We send them away. We don't help them learn to work through it. And that's what I would love to emphasize, that it's okay to feel those feelings. It's okay to take up space. It's okay to be big. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also that the spiritual community also puts that on us. We're not allowed to have feelings outside of happy and joy because those are the high vibrational feelings. And then that was definitely how it was when I first, I would say, started my journey with the spiritual whatever community, how important it was to just be happy all the time. And now I see so many people like, oh, it's okay to feel your feelings, but yet there's still this, but if you have those bad days or you have those bad feelings, you're going to create bad things for yourself, or something bad is going to happen basically from having these bad days or bad feelings or bad months or bad moments or whatever it is. And that I really don't resonate with that anymore. I can't attach to that anymore because I'm a human and I'm going to have all those feelings, and I'm not going to keep believing that my bad days are creating the reality that I see. I think there's just more to it than that. And I'm not going to be made to feel bad. It happens in the spiritual metaphysical community too. So it's something that needs to change and evolve, I think.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I have even been in women's circles where somebody will bring in some big emotions and maybe they're crying, maybe they're yelling. And I've seen, even in the spiritual community, people not sure how to handle that and almost like backing away. No, you work through those emotions on your time somewhere else. I don't want to see that. It's almost like we have to and be a certain way to be spiritual, which is ridiculous. And as you're saying, that whole toxic positivity thing is just, oh my goodness, I'm so tired of it. I'm sorry, there are bad days,
Yeah,
and my bad days or bad weeks are not causing bad things to happen to me. It's so punitive, that thought process, and very big victim blamey. And I really, it does not work for me. I will call it out when I see it because I think it's really insidious because it comes looking like spiritual uplifting, but it's really not. You're just beating somebody up for where they're at.
exactly. Making them feel worse than they already feel for
Exactly.
having a bad day or whatever, bad couple of weeks or couple of months or whatever it is. Yeah. So, is there any kind of tip or advice that you can give on how someone can go about maybe even just starting the process of finding that equilibrium?
That is a wonderful question. I think one of the most important things we can do, and it's very simple and very easy, is learning to ground and release throughout the day. Because I think most of us, by the end of the day, are carrying emotions and feelings and situations that may have happened the day before, 2 days before, and we're still carrying it. And learning to just center yourself, breathe. For me, I imagine roots going down from my right foot and my left foot into the center of Gaia, really that molten core. And I visualize all that stress, all that stuff going down my right foot and being released into that fire that can truly transmute it. And then I imagine in my left foot the energy of that fire, that essence, that transmutated energy pulling back up and filling me up. So it's like the circuit of releasing and pulling and grounding. And I think that is incredibly beneficial. It certainly helps me. I do it throughout the day. If I didn't, I think by the end of the day, I would be a cranky mess.
And it doesn't have to be a long process. It sounds like it's something that just takes a few seconds of your time where you can really connect with that energy and go through that transmutation process.
And absolutely. And the other thing, as you're doing it, be bold enough to actually feel that feeling as it's being released. Think about that situation that maybe you don't want to think about. Come back in touch with it for the moment so you can let it go. You can't heal what you can't look at. And you've got to be able to just pull in that and then release it.
And if you're doing that process and it just doesn't work for whatever you're working on, then I think that's probably an indication that it's something a little deeper that isn't just surface level, and that's okay. And then that's an opportunity to look at that deeper. Maybe you put it on the shelf for a moment and say, okay, I'm going to come back. I don't have the time to do this right this second, but I'm going to come back. I've got some time at 8 o'clock tonight. I'm going to come back and revisit this. And maybe it's journaling or art therapy or working with a coach. Maybe you end up working with someone like you who is the Soma spiritual mentor, and someone can help you with that. And that's okay. I think that's absolutely okay if there are things that are a little bit deeper. So I just wanted the viewers to know that it's okay if you're working on something and you realize this needs a little more than just this exercise. But I think it's a great exercise because, like you said, then it's not all piling up. And I think that's important, because when it all piles up, then eventually we explode, or it's just too much.
And you touched on a point that I bring up a lot in my teaching, and I believe wholeheartedly. Some things are so big that you need to almost heal them in community. You need that other person to help guide you. Maybe they're not doing anything other than witnessing you, but that act alone is incredibly powerful. And when you hit those things that are just big, it's okay. It's okay to turn to community. And community doesn't have to be 25 people. It can be one person that is willing to walk in those flames with you.
Exactly. To feel, I think, like you said, the biggest thing I think is feeling acknowledged, feeling validated, feeling safe, and knowing that it's okay that this is something that's bigger and is something that you're struggling with. Just knowing that somebody else cares, or somebody else, like you said, is just witnessing, can do so much. It can have such a powerful impact in just feeling okay, feeling like you can take that sigh or that deep breath and just kind of like, okay, I'm not alone. It's okay. I'm valid. I matter. I think that's really important.
It is. And I think when some of these bigger things, an emotion that may be problematic to you, we become ashamed, and shame becomes a big piece of our healing journey. We start carrying that, oh, I'm the only person that's ever felt this way, and I'm a bad person for feeling this way. And when you are able to be witness and somebody say, no, you're fine. You have a right to feel what you're feeling. Just feel it, is incredibly powerful. And that I've seen it said that shame dissipates where light is shined. And I love that, because it's true. It's where that love is, where that connection is, that will help ease that shame piece that is so prevalent in our society.
Absolutely. So if someone wanted to work with you, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, I offer, as I said, the mentorship. I also offer energy healings, and I do Jungian tarot readings. So I have, a variety of options. Best way to reach me is either Facebook or Instagram. Facebook is Michelle Manley, and in parentheses it says Magenta Rain. Or my Facebook group is Mystic Healing Alchemy. And then on Instagram, it's Michelle Manley, Mystic Healing Alchemy as well. Those are probably the easiest ways. I am on LinkedIn, but I tend to not be on there frequently.
Okay. Well, I will be sure to put all of those links in the show notes so people can find you that way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Right. Yep. I've really enjoyed our time together, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here and having this chat with me. I've really appreciated everything that you've brought to the table.
Oh, thank you. This was wonderful. I love meeting other like-minded people. It's such a joy.
All right. You have a good rest of your day.
You too. Take care now.
All right. Bye. Thank you for joining me in today's episode. Be sure to check the show notes for guest links and other helpful information. I'm your host, Olivia Paige, and you can find me on all the social media platforms at Ascension Healing Sounds.